Good morning, everyone. Welcome this Saturday. It's a weekend of celebration with Mother's Days, birthdays, and that it is an absolutely gorgeous day. We are here and welcome you to the UCCE Master Gardener Program of Riverside County and Western Waters Water Use Efficiency Landscape Program. Your hosts today are UCCE Master Gardener Melody Knox and myself, Lisa Lemoyne, with Western Water and a Master Gardener. You are in for a very special treat today. If you've ever listened to Becky Levers present on a topic, you will remember that she is thorough and her expertise is off the charts. So we're so happy to bring her here. And she has been a Master Gardener since 2014 and brings her years of experience and expertise to teach us today about native landscapes of color, safety, and water efficiency. Melody, can you give us a Master Gardener event insight before Becky begins her presentation?
I sure can, and welcome everyone. Some of you I know and some of you, of course, I'm not familiar with, but my name is Melody Knox, and I'm glad that you guys are here with me today. And like Lisa was saying, day of celebration, and you guys get to start my birthday off with me excellent today, so woohoo! But I'd like to go ahead and let you know, or I should say mention a few of our Master Gardener events throughout Riverside County. And when I say Riverside County, I'm also mentioning the desert, as well as out here when we say Riverside out on the West County end. We are trained volunteers that offer science-based information, and we advise and educate the public and our community on gardening and horticulture. So we have information tables, and sometimes you'll be at certain events and you'll see that they say Ask the Master Gardener. You might even be at the big box stores like Home Depot, maybe Lowe's, or I think Ace, we're at Ace now, and you'll also see Ask the Master Gardener. Of course, that is us. So again, we're often at the farmers markets throughout Riverside County, Corona, Temecula, which is Vale and Promenade, Moreno Valley, Murrieta, and downtown Riverside. So if you are going to be in the desert area, you will be able to find us, the farmers markets, at Palm Springs or La Quinta. This is on the first Saturday, well, I should say on the first Saturday of the month. And excuse me, I'm getting my birthday calls, you guys, so please forgive me for that. But on the first Saturday of the month, RCD has a Master Gardener table available to the public at this location. So it's a public land use and learning center. So we invite you to tour the 3-acre demonstration garden of sustainable practices. So Lisa, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you,
unless
Melody.
anyone has any quick questions.
Thank you so much. A couple of items for you all. We are in our 12th year of providing these educational programs related to sustainable gardening practices. But I'd like to invite you to enter into the chat any topics that you're interested in hearing about when we kick off our new season in September. Please send them in the chat box. We're going to collect those up, consider them, and try to coordinate them to fruition so that we keep your interest and you're receiving the information that you really want. Challenges in your garden, which we all have. We'd like to consider all of it. Thank you so much. And oh, I wanted to let you know too, for today's presentation, would you please enter your questions to Becky Levers, our speaker, in the chat box. Becky will be answering your questions at the end of her session, and we have time for that, and we look forward to hearing all about what you need to hear. So thank you, and I'm handing this over to Melody once again.
All right, I'm back. I'm pleased to introduce Becky Levers to you. And she's a Master Gardener. I had a chance of working with her a lot through this whole process the time I've been here as a Master Gardener. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in Earth and Environmental Sciences. She's a UCCE Master Gardener, a UC California Naturalist, a CNPS member, and she'll probably have to explain to me more what that means. Also, she's completed a 26-hour symposium sponsored by the Association of Professional Landscape Designers on creating beautiful native landscapes in the face of water scarcity and fire. So obviously we're in good company. We have a well-rounded, educated person here to give us a lot of wonderful information. So please listen. Again, thank you for joining us. And so Becky, I'm turning it over to you.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak to you today about this topic. I remember discussing the title with Janice Rossner. I'm thankful I was able to learn from her the numerous contributions of native plants to our landscapes and lives. I will remember her every time I share that gift with you. She thought we should put safety in the middle of the title. We already know that native plants supply beautiful color with their blooms and their leaves, and we know that they're water efficient. Okay, but we're just starting to accept that they're also suitable for defensible space landscaping called firescaping sometime in California. So I'm not sure what you all know about this topic, so it might be sort of a hit and miss thing for you. I hope you have your smartphones available. What I would like you to do, it's hard for me when I listen to a Zoom program to keep track of the resources in chat, and I just take pictures with my smartphone. So when I show a slide and it's got a link on it or something that you want to keep, just take a snap of it. And then if you would like the actual list of resources I use, more detailed information, just email me. My email is right there, leversbecky@gmail.com. It will be at the end of the presentation too. So I would just love your feedback. And if I don't get around to answering all your questions, or you think of more questions, please email me. Okay, I am going to be showing you a lot of my own ongoing efforts to apply an overlay of defensible landscaping to an already well, really, I first started picking native plants because they were water efficient, but it's kind of hard sometimes. We may have to alter our landscaping a little bit for defensible landscaping. So, okay, let's see here. Oops. Okay, here we go. We're learning that it's not the trees in our traditional forests that are the problem with wildfire so much as how we've been managing them in the past 100+ years. And of course, the intense pressure of 40 million people that live in California, about 10% of the total population of our country. We have been slower to understand that chaparral and coastal sage scrub, sometimes called soft chaparral, does not cause itself to burn. Okay, you often hear these plant communities referred to as fire lovers. They are certainly fire adapted. They've evolved characteristics that allow their species to survive, but that doesn't make them bad plants any more than the pine tree species that need a fire cue for their cones to release seeds. This quote is from Richard Halsey, the author of Fire, Chaparral, and Survival in Southern California. So I love it so much, I'm going to read it to you, although you can read it yourself. This does not mean the chaparral needs to burn to remain healthy, or that it is immune from fire as a destructive force. It merely illustrates the system's ability to continue existing in the face of a powerfully disruptive force under natural conditions. However, conditions are not really natural anymore for any of our wildland areas. 95% of the fires in Southern California are caused by some kind of human-related factor, mostly unintentional. Those of us that live alongside the chaparral are, like this plant, living on the edge. It's us that bring fire to the wildlands, not the other way around. So we need to be fire adapted too. I first got involved with California native plants when I lived in a small town 30 miles south of Fresno. The house we bought had a big front lawn, mostly because there weren't very many houses for sale then in that little town. It seemed such a waste of valuable water to me, so I started removing it and replacing it with native plants I read about in the Las Palitas website. We moved back to Southern California in 2012. I had already started getting rid of the water and chemically dependent fescue lawn in the backyard of our new house when Cal Fire dropped by one day. And we also got a notice from the state of California. So that was a wake up call to us about living in a fire hazard severity zone. We didn't know that. Nowadays, you will know AB, I think it's 38, requires whenever a house is sold in a very high fire hazard zone, there has to be an inspection to show that you're up to date on home hardening and defensible scape stuff. So, but it wasn't like that then. Okay. I will show you how to find out if you're living in a fire hazard area. If you don't know, I'm not sure how involved you are with this. Anyway, the Cal Fire guy seemed happy with the lawn in front, but I was not. Couldn't I have a water efficient landscape which was climate appropriate and still have defensible space? Bert Wilson of Las Palitas had been a firefighter for many years. What did he have to say about all this? So I looked back on his website, and here he started off with basic rules for fire safety. Less plants, each bush should not burn the bush next to it, a little overhead water every week or two, metal screens on the windows, no flammable material next to the house, no shade cloth, no wood piles, no furniture. Stupid things burn real well. And this is what he highlighted himself. Good hygiene in the yard, no weeds, no dead material. So I want to make sure we're on the same page with defensible space. Here is the basic template, amplifying Bert Wilson's concise description. But first you have to start with your home. X marks the spot here. It contains more fuel than the native vegetation that was bulldozed when it was built. It has to be as resistant to embers and fire as possible. This is what is called home hardening. I want you to think of your home like your castle, okay? So zone 0, the ember resistant zone, is like the wall around your castle. Blowing embers ahead of a wildfire is by far the most common reason for ignition. Zone 0 is the most important zone, although we can't ignore the others, and we all have a zone 0. 0 combustibles, none, no dead or dying vegetation. In fact, they recommend no vegetation at all in zone 0. Certainly nothing growing against the house. So very opposite of traditional landscaping. No wooden outside furniture by the house, nothing stored within 5 feet of your home, including anything attached to it, decking, wooden fences or trellises, no firewood, no plastic recycling bins, and no organic mulch. So this is going to be hard for those of us with traditional landscaping, but don't be overwhelmed. Just start with a good cleanup and keep it clean. Like all defensible space, how much you have to apply these principles is dependent on how great your needs are, which we will talk about later. There are no two houses with the exact same interpretation of defensible space, just as there's no two water efficient gardens that are identical. Zone 1 is like the moat around your castle that's surrounded by that wall. It's the next 25 feet or as much as you have of lawn, of landscaping. The lean, clean, relatively well hydrated landscaping. But you have to start thinking about your landscape in terms of fuel load, FUEL, fuel load, and ignition. Lower growing, non-continuous placement of plants, no woody growth recommended, open growth habit. You can use medium or larger organic mulch, but it should be no more than 2 inches deep, which means it's not too much, not as good a weed barrier. And it has to be non-continuous. You've got to break it up somehow. Planting in islands is helpful in this zone. So again, start today with good garden hygiene, removal of dead and dying fuel, and then maybe you might think about removing a few plants to break up any horizontal continuity of fuel that carries fire across your landscape. Limb up the trees, cut their limbs up to 6 feet high at least, remove vegetation from underneath them so that you can provide a vertical non-continuity of fuel that will keep fire out of your trees. For a large home lot, Zone 2 is like the farms and small villages that support your castle, but are outside its protection. This is where the wildlands may border on your property. You can't gather those wildlands up and put them in your fortified castle, but you can thin it out with vertical and horizontal spacing depending on slope. The greater the slope, the more distance required. Weeds and grasses need to be kept down to 4 inches or less. And actually, it's better to cut them if you can while they're still green before all that seed enters the seed bank in your soil. This area can both increase your protection and you can help keep this wildland from being destroyed because of too frequent fires. And make sure you have a clear exit from your home, 4 feet wide if possible, no enclosing hedges and no overhanging trees. Defensible landscaping is not a one-time thing. Maintenance is the key. Maintenance, maintenance, maintenance. Sometimes it's not so much more maintenance as that we just have to be attentive to the thoroughness of that maintenance. It's hard to think of your landscaping as fuel, but plants grow and change. Dead material accumulates under the green exterior of plants. Like Bert Wilson said, good hygiene in the yard, no weeds, no dead material. And once you break up that vertical and horizontal continuity of fuel, that is your plants, you have to maintain it. This is a short 7-minute video from Fire Safe Marin County that does a great job explaining Zone 0 of defensible landscaping. So at the bottom here, if you just search for Fire Safe Marin, Zone 0, Zero Combustibles video, this will pop up somewhere on the page. Be sure you pick this one. It's only 7 minutes. Save the hour-long ones until you're ready for them. But this can be helpful to you. This frame is from that video. Mulching is an issue in defensible space. Inorganic mulch, such as stone or gravel, only in Zone 0, those first 5 feet around your home or anything attached to it, okay? Decking, whatever. Then in the next zone, which is Zone 1, you can use large organic mulch. Large chips, not small, are recommended, but it can't be continuous. You have to break it up with hardscape, or you can even rake little paths through it so that bare soil shows. But if embers come, you don't want them to be able to travel freely towards your house. And then the shredded bark. I know that many native plant gardeners like gorilla hair, and it's used by a very popular native plant designer. And I know he knows how to use it, but it's not allowed in Marin County, so we should think about why that is. And no recycled rubber. It's very flammable, particularly in those small pieces that have a lot of surface area. Okay. I have known for years, actually Zone 0 is only like 2 years old, but I've known for a while because I keep up with this stuff that I needed to work on that. Open eaves and covered porches are not good home design elements and a high fire hazard. You'll see a lot of that in home hardening about enclosing your eaves. But this is the house we bought. It's a craftsman style house, and it's got not only open eaves but extended ones, and there's wood stuff. Craftsman house designers like to use wood. So I've been thinking about a couple years how to make a more robust zone zero. And my husband and I have just been working on it now. So these photos were just now taken. First, I extended the cobble that I had used underneath the eaves because there's no gutters on this house. So I extended that out to 3 or 4 feet. And then you can see in the second video, we left some open soil here and then put in pavers for a walkway. I also left some space in that. Okay, together this makes 7 to 8 feet of zone zero instead of 5, but I feel my home has a bad design and I needed more. Okay, I'm not going to plant anything till this fall, so I have a lot of time what to think about to plant between the pavers. And maybe some native strawberries that would need moderate water, but they're still water efficient, that can spill over a bit into the bare soil area. Weeds have been a huge problem this year with all the rain. So, before the rainy season comes next year, I might put some organic mulch just during the rainy season on this, the soil strip here. See if that works, and then put it back in the yard afterwards. You can see all of that's been removed when work was going on. This really messed up my zone zero too. So we'll see how that works. You can see here that I do have a low growing in the front. That's a low growing Ceanothus in the front, and it does have some woody growth, but I keep it clean underneath, and I prune it a little underneath too. I look for dead wood. But there's also Oregon grape, and there's some verbena. There's also a little manzanita over here, but they're further away from the house. And there's, I think I can. So you can see I'm already, although I'm trying to follow the rules. I'm trying to think how much I need. The wind doesn't blow here, so that gives me a lot of advantages. Okay, this is interesting. Now, Theodore Payne is picking up where Bert Wilson left off, and he's taking a stand on this nursery and foundation is taking a stand on water efficient natives as suitable for the demands of defensible space. This Rethinking Resilience to Wildfire pamphlet actually has some plant suggestions, but you'll notice I underlined it in red. They do tell you, while this brochure offers general guidance, it is essential that you review and follow your local fire codes. Okay. So in the past, plant lists have been very problematic because they weren't really based on science. In fact, there's a lot more that needs to be known about how native plants operate. It's and also they gave the impression that choosing a certain species was all you had to do. That is absolutely not so. It must be the right plant in the right place. It has to be properly maintained and adequately hydrated. Remember your moat, okay? But gardeners need specific suggestions to point them in the right direction, particularly if they're just starting on something new. And that is what Theodore Payne is addressing here. And this is wonderful news. The timing is perfect. You're in time to sign up for a free Zoom class on landscaping for wildfire resilience from Theodore Payne. You can find it just by searching for Theodore Payne Foundation. Click on Learn on that top bar, then click on Classes and Workshops, and just scroll down the page a bit. This is free. Just sign up for it. It will be aired on Friday, May 26th from 2 to 3:30 p.m. I am going to definitely sign up for this. I've done a lot of research on this topic, but there has been very little, in fact, no hands-on help available. So I'm really excited about this, and I hope it's helpful to you. Theodore Payne also makes reference to this site, which has a lot of information for native plant gardeners. Sustainable, defensible landscaping. And I think the URL is at the top of the page. I have a bar that's carving that now, but I think I put it there. Okay. And it also has specific plant choices or ideas that may work for you. And it's really a great website. Okay, attending this symposium held by the Association of Professional Landscape Designers was really very helpful to me. So I was really an oddball in there because it was four designers that are in this association, and its goal was to teach designers for future developments, both housing and commercial, how to use native plants in face of water scarcity and fire. So I think this is really wonderful to think that, there's getting a lot of support for native plants out in the professional community. It was helpful too, because it had many implications for those of us that are applying an overlay of firescaping to our existing landscaping. I want to tell you that our local chapter of the California Native Plant Society, the CNPS, has a horticultural chair that is making contact with this association with the hope of getting a list of certified landscape designers that specialize in this in the Inland Empire. But so far, it looks like the closest county that actually has some designers that have this certificate are in LA, but at least we're working on it. So something to look forward to. When Janice and I decided on this title for this presentation, it doesn't really describe the true potential of gardening with native plants. Large or small, our home landscapes can have many functions, and the plants can serve multiple purposes. We can look beyond the traditional suburban landscapes that were fairly ecologically sterile and create productive, restorative homelands that provide a variety of environmental and personal services to us. A few well-chosen plants that do serve multiple purposes. A garden that can actually be simple in design for and number of plants for small yards, but complex in sustainability. Doug Ptolemy's homegrown national park movement has been a you can do it epiphany for thousands. I hope millions of us across America. I don't think he would mind that I added this little blurb about water efficient to the multiple functions of native plants. To his very insightful graphic, I think this is really a wonderful graphic to kind of think about what native plants can do in any area, and ours too. Doug Ptolemy's from Delaware. Water efficient landscaping is not an issue there. So I think it's okay I added that. Okay. While we can have it all, how each gardener implements the balance in his or her garden will be unique. The more landscaping area you have, the more maintenance, and the more goals you have, the more thoughtful you would have to be about your plant choices. But the potential is huge. There are 3 levels of fire hazard in California, and topographical issues that can make that hazard even more intense. So it wasn't at first, but fire safety has become my first priority. But it's implemented with water efficient wildlife pollinator choices that are sustained by food web practices. For me, No pesticides, no pesticides at all is the golden rule. In fact, I don't use any chemicals, which is probably a little on the extreme side considering, a half an acre of weeds, but still. Okay. For those of you that are hardcore habitat gardeners, there could be an issue of the wild form of a plant, native plant, versus its cultivars. California buckwheat, as it grows in the wild, provides for many species of birds, pollinators, nectars for adult butterflies and moths, and is the host plant for caterpillars of or moths. It says here 15 confirmed and 36 more likely. So a super habitat plant. However, it is not recommended for defensible space as it has an abundance of small dry leaves and develops thin woody branches in the interior of the plant. It ignites easily and burns hot. There are, however, a number of smaller cultivars, and this is one from Theodore Payne. And it also, according to Calscape, is, a pretty robust habitat, birds, butterflies, pollinators, and a host for some of the caterpillars and moths. However, you will see that when you look at the details, it only supports one likely, actually a moth, a white line sphinx. Okay, the caterpillars of this creature, unlike many, is not a picky eater. A lot of native plants support is. So just know that when native plant growers selectively breed for instance, a smaller, more prostrate form of a plant, it can affect more than just the goal trait. There can be ramifications of that. So also, maintenance required in fire hazard is still an issue with this plant. So this is Theodore Payne's low-growing buckwheat, and it's one of 3 that I have planted somewhere together in my yard. I should not have waited until I saw that dying, stuff on top before I looked underneath it. I don't know if you can see really how full of dead material this is. Looks great for starting a fire if you're going camping. So the photo on the right is after I cleaned it up, emptied it, in the inside and trimmed it way back, probably only half of the area it was occupying. And of the 3 plants I had put together in kind of a little island, I trimmed one clear back to the ground. This is called coppicing. Mr. Funes, who is the operation manager of the Gottlieb Native Garden in LA, uses coppicing as one maintenance technique for some native plants. Okay, I should have done this in the fall, but I didn't. I'm always behind the time. I kind of remind myself of my mother-in-law's neighbor in Ohio. He used to paint one side of his house every summer. I feel like I'm maintaining my landscape 1/4 every year, only it's splotchy, a little bit on every side. But I also recall a student at Fresno State when I returned to school, a young woman that told me the best thing for a garden is the gardener's shadow, and that certainly applies to firescaping with native, with anything, but with native plants. So I'm going to quickly show you some of my adventures with maintenance and plant selection, just because maintenance is so important, so very important. So this sage, it measured about 8 by 8, 12 when I really started to look at it. Also, the wrong mulch is underneath it. It's small. Okay, I think it's Cleveland sage. I'm not sure. But anyway, looks great on the surface. But gosh, when I looked underneath the surface, look at all that dead and leaf. Again, you could start a campfire or a forest fire with this plant. And then when you look on the right side, you could see all the woody growth. And you notice that the lateral branches of this plant will grow roots. I don't know if you can see them. Tell them that those are roots. This is an excellent survival strategy for a native chaparral plant that might get burnt down in a forest fire. And it's how I got the original 3 small starts from the mother plant. I cleaned all 3 out and cut them back severely. So now, well, they're a little bigger now, but I watched these guys carefully. I trimmed them up and lifted them off the ground to open up the plant structure. This is not a good ground cover. In fact, you should consider carefully before adding it to Zone 1 at all. So again, although I live in a very high fire hazard severity zone, the highest level of danger, theoretically, the Santa Ana winds do not blow here, and that gives me leeway that you would not have if you live where the winds blow. And I'm ashamed of some of these pictures I'm showing you, but I'm going to be honest with you, okay? So, ceanothus is another backbone for a colorful, water-efficient habitat pollinator garden, but I was not keeping this one on the left here in what we might call a horticulturally pleasing state, or sufficiently hydrated to say the least. It had been growing in kind of a naturalized setting on the edge of Zone 1 for a number of years. Very dumb of me. It was beautiful when it bloomed, but by June this year, it was becoming summer deciduous, not good in defensible space. It's dropping a lot of dead leaves and full of this accumulated dead wood you can see on the picture on the right. So this is it after being cleaned out and limbed up. Ceanothus will self-mulch, okay, make its own mulch, but in the defensible landscaping Zone 1, those dead leaves on the ground need to be removed. Ceanothus, however, does not take heavy pruning well, and this one died the following year. Now I keep up with the ones I have, cleaning out small dead wood regularly, not waiting until it becomes a big disaster. This is a beautiful manzanita, another wonderful California native wildlife and pollinator foundation plant. Very water efficient. It's on a northeast facing incline. It received artificial water until it was established, but for the last 6 years on rainwater alone, one of the places I can still kind of rely on that, although not entirely anymore. I'm too scared now. There are many manzanitas with various sizes and growth habits. So this one has got a lovely open structure, and it was growing where Zone 1 kind of morphs into Zone 2. But it had some dead wood, as you see on the left-hand photo, and it also has flaky bark, okay? So how do I call that? Anyway, that mildly peeling bark, it's not really that bad, but it's not really a desirable trait in fire-wise landscaping. So I chiseled out a new watering ring for it for once a month soaking, as I did for those sages, in order to keep this plant better hydrated. And then this is beautiful, but boy, a lot of work. I encouraged on the photo on the right, wild fleabane that just kind of appeared in my yard but I selectively weeded for a couple of years. These meadows are a lot of work. They're very beautiful in the early spring, especially if we get the winter rains, yet they're ephemeral like an annual wildflower that dies back before summer. So I removed the dying plants by the beginning of June. That horizontal continuity had become really, when it dried out, like a flashy fuel that carries fire rapidly. Also, the baby rattlesnakes show up about that time. And I want to be able to see them. So actually, this, I just want to tell you the photo on the right is what this area looks like now. Wildflowers cannot compete with invasive grasses and weeds and thus require constant investment of time every year. So if you're going to do something like this, do it in a small space if you've got the time. Because remember, the maintenance you do has got to be sustainable for you too. You know, I'm going to have to talk faster or we're not going to have much time. So anyway, but this is okay. I think I weeded around the stones and then I weed whacked twice. Okay. So here is another ceanothus across in zone 2. I kind of weed under them because they're close to the backyard, that big backyard, but there's very little weeds. And then I find little jewels like this. This is a bicolor lupin. It's not flashy at all bloomer, but it grows naturally in my area, so I know it's supporting wildlife. So I still am crazy with this. I weed eat this area next to my neighbors. This is the fence between us. But I left some of this. I sort of weeded it. I admit I weeded that wildflower. But then I used the weed whacker where there was more weeds but flowers. But I left some there. But I'll be back in a couple of weeks to clean this up because I want my neighbors to know that I am cognizant of their safety too. This might be my zone 2, but it's their zone 1. This is where they keep their, recycling and trash bins and stuff like that. Okay. Now, I turned 180. There's another fence at the base of this picture on the right, and this is the landscaping I have next to their backyard. But they have landscape back there with cement and this huge swimming pool complex. So it's basically a huge zone 0, very non-combustible. So in this part of my yard, habitat gardening, mostly for quail, they nest down here. Anyway, habitat gardening kind of surfaced to my top priority here because I can get away with it. If this part of my zone 2 had abutted on native vegetation or even solid vegetation of any type, I wouldn't have been able to do this. So I just want to remind you that our huge rainfall this year is kind of a mixed bag. Everything grows. It grows and grows and grows. So on the left, you see a fire break that is totally covered with very tall, probably 2 feet tall, grassy stuff. And when this dries in the summer, when the temperatures get hot, which I'll probably start doing next week, it will provide a horizontal continuity for wildfire to move through that wild landscape. Now, in my yard, that was manufactured by what I call storksbill or cranebill, just almost closed a DG path in my backyard. Okay, this little flower here. So it's easy to weed DG when it's a little wet. I have to thank a master gardener friend of mine, Linda Powell, for reminding me. Just wet it a little bit and you can pull out weeds easily. So here it is. But remember, nobody is weeding in the wild. So you got to be prepared for that downside of a lot of rain. Okay, I've got a lot to do. Some of my islands of vegetation in zone 1 have kind of grown into small continents, as you can see here on the right. And there's a lot of herbaceous growth still underneath the oak trees. A lot of it is native miner's lettuce and phacelia, but I have time now. It's too wet to really weed too much down there, but I waded through and took out all the weedy grasses that were growing. I didn't want them to go to seed. Okay, so I'm going to skip ahead. I'm going to try to go real quick here for 3 minutes. These are plants to avoid in landscaping, invasive species, and things like pampas grass. These carry fire really badly, and they're bad anyway. High biomass plants, including the California native palm. That plant grows naturally in desert oasis areas, and that's a good place for it. A wildfire is not a threat, has not been traditionally in deserts because there's not enough vegetation. Okay, high oil content. I do have to mention this. This is the pines, conifers, cypress, junipers. They're beautiful plants, but they are fire. They burn well in their native habitats without introducing them into a chaparral or coastal sage scrub areas. And so we really shouldn't use them. And actually, if you have landscaping junipers, you should get rid of them right now. Firefighters call them green gas cans. And of course, the flashy fuels. So not only the tall grasses, invasive grasses and weeds, but even my pretty fleabane, once it dried out, has got to go. So real quickly, to find your fire hazard area, if you don't know, this is a map, all of this red and pink, of the very high fire hazard area in western Riverside County. The red is a local area, and the local, like a fire district or a municipal or a county fire department, and you have to, if you live in a red area, you have to look to them for expectations of defensible space landscaping. The state requires they have how would I say, as robust defenses as the state requires in their high area, but they can have even more. They can ask for more if they want to, if they feel that their area needs it. The pink is actually a combination of the state responsibility area, the federal responsibility area, and then tribal lands that on reservations that are handled by tribal fire departments. So real quickly, what I'm going to do, because this gets very confusing. The state has a new 2022 update, but it's kind of in limbo, and it only applies to the state area, not anything else. So if you would use that website on top and just look at the 2007 map. And the way this works is you click on the little binocular icon on the left. Okay, but first take a picture of this slide, because when you click on that icon, a address prompt will show up. Here it is, but the color coding disappears. So you really need to have that when you're looking at it. So in this prompt, type in your address. I typed in mine, and then hit on the little binocular. And here you see my house, this red dot, right in the middle of a very high fire hazard area. I'm in the state-controlled pinkish area. I mean the state-serviced, but this high fire hazard local areas in Calamasa and Yucaipa are just surround the area. So although I live in a housing development, it's surrounded by what's called the urban wildland urban interface, and so are the roads that leave this area. So you have to think about that. If you're thinking of buying a house, check this out to make sure that you want to deal with it. Okay, and there are factors that increase your danger in addition to your official fire hazard group that you're in. If the wind blows, wind drives fires in California. If you're in a windy area, you have more of a threat. If you live on the top of a slope, on a hill or a ridge, fire leans into that slope, warms the vegetation. You know, it's a dangerous place to live. If you live in a cul-de-sac, especially if it's budding vegetation of any type, if you're on the outside of it and it's vegetation, you have more to do than your neighbor across the street. The street is kind of a fire break, but the big problem is there is huge congestion in cul-de-sacs. Please leave long before the fire engines arrive. They'll take up all the street, and they waste a lot of time evacuating people that should already be gone. So go early, let them do their jobs, and think about whether or not some of you, if you live on a south-facing slope, this is an example of the dramatic difference there can be from living on a north-facing slope if you live on a slope or a south-facing. This is just a little ravine up in the hills out above my house, about a mile or so away. I was walking in the ravine. I looked to the the left, and took the photo you see on the left, the north-facing slope that came into that ravine. And then I didn't move a step, but I just turned okay, wait a minute, I got this wrong. I looked to my left, that was the north-facing slope, took that picture. Then I looked to the right and took this picture. This is the right-facing slope. It doesn't even look like the same planet. I had not moved a step. So exposure to sun during the long summer months. So be aware of that. And finally, I want to tell you about this neighborhood in Santa Rosa, coffee neighborhood. This is the morning of October 8th. Actually, October is the month most representative on the disastrous fires in California happening in October, but there are some later months. Anyway, there it is, October 8th. This is the next morning after a fire moved through that was started 8 miles north of this area. This area is in Santa Rosa, northeast corner. It's not even in the wildland urban interface, but a fire started 8 miles north by a spark. Somebody was working on his electrical problem in his home. It sparked, there was wind, and boom. So these people barely had time to grab their sleeping children about 3 o'clock in the morning and escape before the fire hit them. Some did not escape. So please take a look at Cal Fire's. Well, all of their stuff is great, but take a look at.
Can anybody hear me?
I can hear you, Rosa.
Okay. I think that um that Becky signed out. Oh, there she is. She is having some trouble with the computer. I'm not sure what's going on. But she asked if there are any questions. I think in the meantime, if there are any questions, we can you can put them in the chat. So Becky's having technical difficulties on that computer, but you guys can hear us, right? Lisa? Can you hear us?
Rosa, this is Jean Weiss, and I can hear.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm just gonna go over some questions that I see here. Let's see, from Margaret, would like to hear about what specific plants would be good in zone 1 of my yard. So Becky?
Refer to Theodore Payne. They've actually got a plant list, and so does the Sustainable Landscaping website. And you can actually look at RCRCD has a publication called Living on the Edge. They also have plant suggestions. They don't have a zone 0 yet, but you're not planning in zone 0 anyway. So basically, it's plants that meet that less fuel load, open growth. Penstemons, for instance, would be a great plant in and they're so easy to grow in zone 1. And you can cut them back when they're done blooming, and wait for next year. But there are those choices available to you for specific plants. Okay.
I think we have, let's see. Oh, I see here, I see a question right here.
Okay, there's one about this.
Yes, you got that.
Yeah, I don't know really that the same nectar providing quality as of flowering plants attract bees, but do realize that there are, I think, 1,600 native bee species in California. Very few of them sting. They don't have hives to protect. They're solitary nesters, the females. Most of them are. So I don't have really an answer for that. But you should keep your EpiPen handy, probably.
So I think unless there are any other questions, I do not see them in the chat. Wait a minute, let's see. That was the ones on bees. Yeah, I think unless there are any other questions, I think we are pretty much done. So we can
Please email me if you think of anything, and I'll do my best to answer your questions if you have some later. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Great. So thank you, Becky, for presenting to us today. It was wonderful to have you. And we will thank everybody for attending our workshop as well. This recording will be online on the WMWD website, as well as VMS for Master Gardeners. We look forward to seeing you in September. That it will be our next workshop. And thank you all. Have a wonderful day. I will add Becky's email address in the chat in just a moment, but thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Becky, for an excellent presentation, so informative and critical to all of us who garden in SoCal.
Becky.
We hope you've all enjoyed this presentation, and we'll have a wonderful summer until we see you again in September. Western Water and the UCCE Master Gardener Program of Riverside County are grateful that you attend and hope to bring you a new season of exciting topics. For those who listed a few in the chat, thank you so much. We're adding those to our list. And we wish you all happy Mother's Day in your homes and a wonderful weekend.